Hey guys, welcome back to Nerd Crave. So, this video topic came from a viewer, and quite honestly, it's a topic that is very difficult to really do justice to. Today we're going to talk about the TV show Firefly. Firefly is, by all accounts, by just about anyone who's watched it, considered to be the best TV show that was ever cancelled too soon. Firefly only got 13 episodes, only 10 or 11 of which ever actually aired on TV. Firefly was doomed from the beginning. It was put on a crappy time slot, on a crappy day. Nobody watched it. To make matters worse, some of the episodes were aired out of order and confused people. But Firefly still managed to gather a huge cult audience. Young people in the 90s, that teens through 20s and 30s crowd, absolutely loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I can't say enough about how great that show is either. However, with Firefly, Joss Whedon wanted to do something completely different and maybe appeal to a little bit of a different demographic, and that may be part of the reason why this didn't work so well. Because where this show got placed in the TV schedule, it was later at night, on a weekend, and the people that were watching it really didn't understand what he was going for, I think. And yet, Firefly managed to put together a rabid audience of fans in just 10 or 11 short episodes that were aired. Firefly actually experienced far more success on its released DVD with the complete 13-episode run than it ever did on TV. And after a couple of years of people catching up on the DVD series, it began to develop such a life of its own online in fan communities and stuff like that, that they were actually able to make a companion movie to follow up the series, which was actually released in theaters and called Serenity. It can't be overstated the importance of Firefly and the cast and crew, the actual actors, to the nerd community in general. Over the last 18 years since Firefly first aired, the cast and crew, the actual actors who portrayed the cast and crew of the Firefly, have become legendary in the nerd community. They've appeared all over the world at Comic-Cons and fan expos and things of that nature. I've seen them myself more than once at various comic book conventions. They do discussion panels, just like you would see for Star Trek, for example, Star Trek fan conventions, while there are Firefly fan conventions. The cast and crew, Nathan Fillion and Alan Tudyk particularly, have become nerd royalty, up there with the likes of Will Wheaton, Zachary Levi, Felicia Day, and then you've got Adam Baldwin. Everybody pretty much knows Adam Baldwin now from shows like Chuck and The Last Ship, where he tends to play the same kind of character, kind of a tough guy, super conservative, tough guy, no nonsense, likes his guns and that sort of thing. And that's really who Adam Baldwin is in real life, so he tends to play himself in everything that he ever does on circuit. They can appear almost every weekend during Comic-Con season, and honestly, if they never did another acting job in their life, they would have a good income for the rest of their lives just signing autographs and appearing for photographs. The nerd community is absolutely rabid about these people and about being connected, continuing to be connected to Firefly and these characters to this day. You can go on YouTube right now and you'll find thousands of videos about the Firefly cast appearing on panels, Comic-Con panels, going back 10, 15 years. A little more recently, in the last 7 or 8 years, Nathan Fillion and Zachary Levi have really developed kind of a nerd friendship. Nathan Fillion has appeared several times at Zachary Levi's Nerd HQ side convention. He did do this for several years, parallel to San Diego's Comic-Con, which is the biggest event in the country every year. Nerd HQ would bring together some of the best interviews and the best panels that fans wanted to see year after year after year. And they did it all for charity. A Nathan Fillion signature will easily demand $40 for a signed photograph, and thousands of people line up, more people than he could possibly serve in one day, lining up to get a signed photograph of him in Firefly outfits, or thousands of people will line up at these events just to get a signature or just to get a glimpse of Nathan Fillion or Zachary Levi or any one of these nerd icons. Firefly has just as much of a fan base at this point with only 14 episodes as Star Trek does with hundreds of episodes. It's absolutely astounding how this little show that could just managed to absolutely captivate 2 decades of an audience. Firefly was a really ambitious idea, and it could have gone amazing places if it was given the chance. It had Star Trek level special effects, a fantastic ensemble cast of characters, just very lovable characters, intriguing storylines, a very interesting dynamic of it being basically a Western in space with that whole kind of motif of brown leather and pistols shot from the hip, and then they wove in this whole kind of Chinese at that point in Earth's history had become the dominant language, and so the lingo that they had their own lingo in the show. There was all kinds of different expletives and swear words and things like that were loosely based on the Chinese language, I guess. Firefly kickstarted the careers of several people, from Jewel Staite, who was the ship's mechanic on Firefly, who went on to play in the Stargate franchise, Nathan Fillion, the captain, who went on to several things, including he's probably most well known at this point for his TV show Castle. Gina Torres has been in quite a few things since then. Morena Baccarin, who is now probably most famous for her role in Homeland and also for being Deadpool's girlfriend in the Deadpool movies. Cast and characters of Firefly were absolutely fantastic. The interaction, the dynamic, the chemistry between the characters on that show was so lovable, but by the time you had got through the 13-episode season, you felt like you had spent a lifetime with these people. You knew them so well. They managed to relate not only to each other, but to the camera in such a way that you really felt like these people were your friends and not just something you were watching on a screen. I mentioned it was presented somewhat as a Western, and a lot of the themes of the shows pulled heavily from Western shows like Gunsmoke and John Wayne movies and things like that, where they would have standoff at the OK Corral type moments, or there was one, famous episode where they did a train heist where they literally brought the ship over the train and went down on ropes on top of the train and cut a hole in the roof and, stole something from inside the train and took it up away in the ship and flew away. The concept is that there was a huge war for independence among humans, and I guess the good guys lost and kind of the imperial bad guys won, and so now the crew of this little Firefly-class ship named Serenity, they're basically smugglers, kind of pirates. They're kind of living on the fringes of the galaxy, and they're trying to eke out a living by, carrying cargo from one place to another to, just make enough money to survive and stay free from the overlords. A lot of people might not know that Firefly actually continued to tell its story through comic books, much like Buffy the Vampire Slayer that got an official release of, Season 8, Season 9, Season 10, and on. In comic books, Firefly also got quite a few additional comic books, some standalone stories, and some series that continued to tell the story of where Firefly went after the cancellation of the show. So there is actually some canonical information that you can get by reading these comic books. They're quite cheap comic books to pick up, so if you go into a comic book store, you can probably find most of them for $1 a piece, or you can download something like Comixology and just read them on your tablet or your phone if you so wish. But there is a lot more information out there, and it is, unlike a lot of other comic books based on TV shows, these are considered canon because in most cases they were either written or authorized or produced by Joss Whedon himself or overseen by Joss Whedon in such a way that when you read them, you know they are part of the official story. So what does Firefly look like almost 20 years later? Firefly stands up really well. The special effects, the combination of CGI and practical effects work together to the point where it is not at all jarring to go back and watch this show. Unlike some shows that are made around the same time, Firefly's special effects actually hold up pretty well. As I said earlier, it's a show on the quality level of a Star Trek show, so the special effects are really good. They were really ambitious, and even today they still look pretty decent. The fact that they avoided using laser guns and stuck with bullet-firing Western-style guns helped that because there weren't so many special effects. The only really special effects you saw in the show were exterior shots of the ship flying in the atmosphere or something like that, background space shots and stuff, and a lot of those were practical effects as well. So you find that the special effects in a show that relies heavily on practical effects will stand up to the test of time a lot more than older shows with a lot of CGI. Take, for example, a show like Babylon 5. Now, granted, it was several years older than Firefly, but Babylon 5 is almost unwatchable today because the special effects are so comically bad. But Firefly having a lot of practical effects, similar to the early Star Wars movies where, the CGI was very minimal and it was mostly practical effects. In other words, models and, lighting tricks and camera tricks and things like that, as opposed to computer-generated images. It actually won a Primetime Emmy Award for outstanding special visual effects for a series. In 2013, TV Guide ranked Firefly as number 5 on their list of TV shows cancelled too soon. And that is no joke. To this day, there are millions of rabid fans who want Firefly to come back, and there have been rumors circling and circling around. I think Joss Whedon actually would like to bring it back. Problem is, when you bring back a show that has been gone for 15 or 20 years, there is such an expectation amongst the fans, and it's very hard to live up to that expectation. Very similar to if you grew up in the late 70s and early 80s with Star Wars, and then you saw the 90s Star Wars prequel movies, you were probably pretty disappointed. And that's not because the prequel movies were bad. They were actually pretty good as movies go, but as your expectations of Star Wars, they were not what you were hoping for. And the same goes for trying to bring back a series that has been gone for almost 20 years. Firefly has developed a life of its own at this point. People have invested so much into picking apart every detail of that show, and they have their own fan theories about how things should progress into the future. Not to mention the fact that the actors and actresses have aged by almost 20 years, so they would have to account for that similarly to how they accounted to Luke Skywalker coming back, being in his 60s instead of his 20s. They're going to have to do something that's 20 years later to account for the aging of the cast. And also, you've got some of the cast members who are engaged in other things and just may not want to come back to the series. So the question remains then, if they do Firefly, would they do a reboot with different characters, which is going to piss everyone off because the characters were the best part of the show? Or do they try to bring back the old characters and do some kind of a mini-series or something of that nature, portraying it 20 years later? Because obviously, Nathan Fillion at this point is an above middle-aged man. Jewel State still looks fantastic. All the women really have aged pretty well. Marina Baccarin looks better today than she did back then. But the men have not aged so well, unfortunately. Nathan Fillion no longer looks like a swashbuckling pirate. He looks like somebody's high school principal. So what is the future of Firefly? I do believe that at some point in this culture we have of remakes and reboots that we are going to see more from Firefly. Joss Whedon is a huge character in Hollywood now, having directed things like The Avengers. He has a ton of street cred, and if he decides that he wants to make Firefly, somebody will pay for it. However, how is he going to do it in a way that will not piss off the fans? That's the question. So does Firefly live on in our hearts as just the best 14 episodes that we have ever seen? Or does it have a future going forward for the next generation? Is it something that is going to capture the attention of the next generation but piss off the current fans? Or is Joss Whedon going to be able to blend those two demographics? Or is Joss Whedon going to be able to blend those two demographics in a way that is going to please everyone? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thanks, guys. Stay classy.
Hi. Nathan Fillion here to talk about a serious condition that affects millions of gamers every year. Swamp ass. Prolonged gaming sessions can create a humid, bayou-style climate in the back of your pants, leading to irritation, foul body odor, and a loss of hand-eye coordination. In extreme cases, grundle staining. Applying powders, bombs, or wet naps while playing only masks the problem and seriously impairs one's ability to majorly pwn one's adversaries. So, if your taint's moist and your upper crack is dripping down your backside, do something about it. Put the controller down, stand up, take a walk outside, or use your mother's hair dryer in between raids. I do.